should be connected. Should be. Waiting for my video. Okay. Okay, it's connecting. YouTube is working. Should be connected. 4 people. All right.
Good.
Should be. Now, what about Facebook?
Okay. Okay. So you want me to start the talk again? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm really excited to be here to give this talk on life in the Southern United States. And I'm going to begin. And I'm going to begin by talking about some stereotypes of life in the South, because people believe a lot of things about the South. Some of them are true, and some of them are not true. Okay, so here are some stereotypes about the American South. The first one is people refer to the South as though it's all the same thing. The second one is that people are very religious. The third one is that people are illiterate and poorly educated. The fourth one is that things move more slowly. The fifth one is that everyone lives out in the countryside. The sixth is that people are very polite. And the seventh is that everyone is poor.
Gotta do the live scene thing. Okay. Okay, this is working. And what about YouTube? Gotta do the live scene thing. Okay. Perfect. Okay, Facebook is working. Confirmed. YouTube should be working. Okay, Facebook is working. Do live stream. Okay, Facebook is going. Okay, that's working. That's good. I don't have to like start over, but it doesn't. Just want to find the YouTube link. YouTube Studio. Okay, it's live. Everything's working. Okay. Just get right here. Okay, it's working. It's just YouTube being YouTube. All right, so let's keep going. Sorry about that. So
Okay.
people are illiterate and poorly educated, right? Is that where we stopped?
I read through the whole slide, so if
Yeah,
you want
okay.
to translate the whole slide.
Yes, I do. Okay, so, опять же, да, то есть на юге все одинаково, люди очень религиозные, люди не умеют читать и все очень плохо с образованием. Вот, все там движется очень медленно, да, ритм жизни. Все живут где-то в стране, не в стране, а в сельской местности, да. Люди очень вежливые и все очень бедные. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the first stereotype is thinking about the South as all the same place, and this is false. The South is very diverse.
То есть,
So just like in Russia, you can't really talk about Russia as being one place. The South has many variations as well.
То есть так же, как и Россия. Первый стереотип – это что на юге все штаты одинаковые. Да? Так же, как и про Россию мы говорим, что в России все одинаково. Да? Конечно же, это не так. Вот, все места различаются. Да? Вот, окей. Отличаются.
And this map shows the states that are usually considered part of the South, and the ones that are in red are considered the deep South.
То есть те штаты, которые выделены на карте красным, являются глубоким югом. Там, где больше всего сохранились южные традиции. Okay.
Okay, so the next stereotype is about religion. So people think that everyone in the South is very religious, and that really is very true. So most of the South is also referred to as the Bible Belt, and people really do define a lot about themselves based on their churches and their religion. Just to give you an example, when I first moved to Alabama, one of the first questions that people asked me was what church that I would go to.
То есть следующий стереотип про юг – это что люди там очень религиозные, да? И это правда. То есть когда я переехал в Алабаму, в штат Алабама, первое, что меня спросили, это в какую церковь ты ходишь, да? Какой у тебя приход. Okay.
And so it is. People are very religious down here, but at the same time, it is. Are also people who are atheist, especially in the bigger cities.
То есть действительно, что в сельской местности в основном все религиозные, но в больших городах тоже есть большая часть атеистов, которые там живет. Okay.
Now, another stereotype about the South is that people are illiterate and poorly educated. And I have to say that there's some truth to this, but it's also not entirely true. So it is true that in the South, we have higher rates of illiteracy than in some other parts of the country. And it is also true that we spend less money per student in the schools than they do in other parts of the country. But at the same time, we have some truly amazing research universities in the South.
Okay, so the next... Wait a minute, I'm translating. Да, следующий, то есть стереотип, это что люди на юге, да, очень, там, все очень плохо с образованием, то есть частично это правда, и частично нет. То есть та часть, которая относится к правде, это что действительно в среднем уровень образования ниже на юге, но также там находится очень много известных институтов, которые занимаются научными исследованиями. Вот, такие как Rice, Duke University and so on. То есть и да, и есть часть правды, и не совсем. Okay.
Okay. So another stereotype about the South is that things move more slowly here. And this really is true. People who move from the North to the South notice that there is a difference. In the South, people talk more slowly. People have a much more relaxed attitude. People seem to be less in a hurry. But of course, there are exceptions. So if you go to a big city like Atlanta, it will feel very much like a big city anyplace else.
Окей, то есть следующий стереотип это про Атланту. Там есть? Работает? Окей. Ага, окей. То есть все действительно движется чуть медленнее, да, кроме, конечно же, больших крупных городов. Вот. Такие как Атланта, да, там, естественно, гораздо более Быстрый. Ага, okay. Ready.
But in the South, there is a general feeling of sort of moving slowly, taking your time. People like to socialize and spend time just sitting down and visiting and talking in a way that is different from many parts of the country.
Окей, да, то есть в целом люди хотят немножко, то есть расслабиться, пообщаться, социализироваться и не тратить слишком много времени на побегушки. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, of course, another stereotype is of people all living in the country. So when people think of the South, they think of people living on farms or living in like houses far away from each other. And of course, there are places like that. But of course, this is hardly true. We have some very enormous cities in the South. The pictures above show New Orleans, Atlanta, and Norfolk, Virginia. And we have giant cities like any other place in the country.
То есть, опять же, стереотип о том, что все живут в сельской местности, полностью опровергается, так как у нас есть очень много крупных мегаполисов, большие города, вот, в которых в основном живут люди. Okay.
Okay. All right. And so another thing that people know about the South is that people are polite and nice. And this is very much true. The South is known for its Southern hospitality.
То есть стереотип о том, что все очень вежливые, это действительно так и есть, что есть такой термин, как южная гостеприимчивость.
And when you visit the South, there are certain things that you will hear people say that you won't hear in other parts of the country. So, for example, when people talk to one another, especially when children speak to adults, they say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. These are polite forms of speaking that you don't hear as much elsewhere.
Okay, yeah, то есть есть использование. Yeah.
And then also you'll hear things like honey, baby, sweetheart. So when you maybe go to a restaurant, the waitress or waiter might call you honey or baby or sweetheart, as you know, they'll ask you what do you want to drink, and they'll say, sure, honey. And it's a very sort of sweet way of talking to people, but you don't hear this in other parts of the country.
Да. То есть, если вы пойдете в ресторан где-то на юге, то услышите такие термины, как милый, дорогой, сладкий, да, то есть те термины, которые обычно не используются в других частях страны, на юге приветствуются.
And this really is just a way that we talk in the South. So even sometimes when I am talking to my students, if a student asks me a question, I might answer the student like, no, sweetheart, you can't do that.
Right. It's also, I heard that in upstate New York, so I mean, it's for some reason, upstate New York seems to really want to be in the South. It's amazing. I don't know. It's cool, you know. Okay, but
yeah.
Let's move on. То есть, когда я иногда могу сказать студенту, что типа, дорогой, нельзя это делать, да? Вот, это нормально. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then, of course, one of the stereotypes is that everybody is poor. And that's false. We do have, a lot of wealth in the South. But it is true that we have higher rates of poverty in the South than in many other states. So we have extremes of rich and poor in the South. But that's true in other parts of the country as well.
То есть, опять же, стереотип, что все на юге бедные, естественно, является правдой, да, то есть, но, опять же, то есть уровень бедности выше в среднем, чем в других штатах в стране.
And there certainly are other parts of the country that have high rates of poverty as well.
И, конечно же, есть другие части страны, где тоже очень высокие уровни бедности. Right.
Okay. All right. So now I just want to talk teeny bit about the background of the South, and I'm sure that a lot of you know this from your own history courses, but as you probably know, prior to the Civil War, two of the biggest crops that were grown in the South were sugarcane and cotton.
Окей, то есть насчет экономики юга, да, она основывается именно на сахаре, на тростнике и на хлопке.
And these crops are still grown today. And so when you drive through different places in the South, you will see sugarcane fields and you will see cotton fields like the ones pictured here.
Да, то есть когда вы будете на юге, вы увидите эти поля, хлопка, тростника и так далее. Okay.
Okay. Now, that economy, of course, created a situation where the farmers used slave labor, and they often lived in these very fancy homes called plantations. And these plantations, many of them are now museums. You can drive through various parts of the South and see these, and you can visit them.
Okay, so, да, то есть насчет плантаций, те люди, которые развивали экономику, да, в плане вот хлопка, в плане тростника, да, они жили на таких огромных усадьбах, плантациях. Вот. Okay.
And so, for example, where I grew up in Louisiana, within maybe, an hour or two, I could drive to maybe, 5 or 6 of these plantation homes that are still standing and are now museums.
То есть большинство из этих плантаций и усадьб, они уже превратились в музеи на данный момент.
So there are quite a lot of these, actually.
Очень много таких.
Okay. So some other things that are grown in the South that you may be familiar with are peaches. So where I live in Alabama, they grow a lot of peaches a little bit north of me, and also they grow a lot of peaches in Georgia and South Carolina.
То есть очень примеры, да, орехи, да, и другие фрукты, которые выращивают на юге, то есть их можно увидеть очень часто, если вы проезжаете просто через некоторые южные штаты.
And so these nuts that he mentioned, pecans, are grown here and in other places in the South. Also peanuts. And so these are featured in a lot of the dishes that people eat, a lot of the food that people eat.
То есть те фрукты и орехи, которые вы видите, они часто используются в блюдах на юге, да, то есть люди их активно употребляют в кухне.
Okay. So another thing that, of course, you might know a little bit about in the South is some of the aspects of our culture. So, for example, you know that a lot of, country music is popular here in the South. And so places like Nashville, Tennessee, and other cities in the South are famous for their music industry and their musical scene.
Right. So, юг также очень популярен. То есть, что очень популярно на юге, это музыка в стиле country, да, еда и футбол, да, американский.
And yes, and so football is also very, very popular in the South, especially university football. So there's a difference between professional football and university football. And in the South, people are very obsessed with university football. And again, one of the things that people will ask you when you move to a new place is which football team do you root for?
Right, so, то есть на юге также, когда тебя спросят про церковь, то есть какой у тебя приход, важно две вещи, то есть в какую церковь ты ходишь и за какую футбольную команду ты фанатеешь. Okay.
And then, of course, we are known for our food, good Southern cooking.
И также очень известен юг южной кухни, да, она славится по всей Америке. All right.
Okay, and so some of the foods that we eat in the South that you may not see in some other places, although of course many of these things are popular everywhere now. Fried chicken, and you know I know that you guys have Kentucky Fried Chicken in Russia now, but homemade fried chicken is always better, of course.
Of course.
And then something called grits, which is kind of like our version of kasha. Made of corn.
Окей, да, то есть есть жареная курица, но курица из KFC и курица, так сказать, настоящая курица сделана на юге, это две разные вещи, да. И grits это, ну, также, да, каша, по сути, да. Ага, окей.
Savory, it's salty.
Ага, очень соленая такая.
Okay. And then other foods that we're famous for, barbecue, which you can find especially in places like Tennessee. Memphis is known for having barbecue. Biscuits with gravy, and then pecan pie.
То есть вот это одни из самых известных блюд, которые вы видите, да, это барбекю, то есть ребрышки барбекю, вот, булочки с подливкой и пирог с грецкими орехами. I'm getting hungry. Every time someone talks about food, you know, during these streams, it's like time for dinner. Okay, but okay, I'm good.
I know. Well,
What?
When I was making this presentation and I was finding really good photographs of the food, it was making me really hungry.
This is a great presentation, I'm telling you.
Okay.
All right.
So, and then one other thing that's very unique to the South is sweet tea. So, and you're going to have to translate this part. So when you go to a restaurant in the North and you ask for tea, they will probably bring you hot tea. If they bring you cold tea, it will have no sugar in it. In the South, if you go to a restaurant and you order tea, it will come already sweetened, and it's actually made differently. They boil the sugar into the water when they make the tea, so it's very, very sweet.
Okay, I hope you're not a diabetic, eh? But I want to try it. Okay, то есть
Yeah.
No, it sounds awesome, actually. Okay, so, то есть, когда обычно, да, если вы на севере или в России, там, в Европе, да, вы попросите чай, вам обычно принесут горячий чай без сахара. Вот, но если вы на юге, то вам принесут, да, вы спросите, можно, пожалуйста, чай, они принесут вам холодный, подслащенный чай, да, и у них особый рецепт, то есть они, сахар варится, и он как бы с водой соединяется, да, на молекулярном уровне. То есть это совсем уникальный чай. Okay.
And so if you go to a restaurant in the South and you don't want sweet tea, you have to specifically ask for tea without sugar, or they will bring you the sweet tea.
Да, то есть нужно, если вы хотите просто обычную чашку горячего чая, обязательно нужно, так сказать, это сказать, либо вам принесут вот такой чай.
Yeah, so that's an adjustment for people who move to the South.
Yeah, certainly. But man, I miss
right?
I see. Okay.
Yeah. But of course, as I said before, since the South is really a lot of different places, there are regional variations that you'll find in the South. So, for example, in Louisiana, where I grew up, one of the regional variations is Cajun food. So that's, derived from like French and African and Caribbean influence. And so these are two very popular dishes that, for example, my mom would cook when I was growing up. One is called gumbo, which is sort of like a stew with meats, right? And then the other is red beans and rice, which is just red beans kind of like you would eat in a Georgian restaurant, but cooked with sausage and onions and things like that.
Getting ever more hungry. But I see some shrimp in the gumbo, so it's just like seafood and...
Yeah, the gumbo has shrimp and sausage.
Nice. Okay, so, да, то есть есть два блюда. Это на юге есть карибские, так сказать, нотки играют на их кухне. В их кухне, да, то есть гамбо это смесь острых перцев, мяса, рыбы тут, да. Следующее блюдо это красная баба и рис. Там просто мясо, это больше похоже на грузинскую кухню, да. Окей.
Okay. All right. If you go to Miami, Florida, you'll get Cuban food. So there's a large Cuban population there. So there are many Cuban restaurants as well. And so you can get Cuban food. And so, of course, you see some marinated meat with peppers, some black beans and rice, and then fried plantains. And the picture on the right is of plantains, which look like bananas, but are not exactly bananas.
These look exactly like bananas. Okay. Right. То есть,
yeah, but they're not.
Okay. Maybe you can tell us why, but okay. Да, то есть, если также, например, во Флориде, Майами, да, очень много людей из Кубы там находятся, да, поэтому там очень хорошо развита кухня, да, кубинская. Вот, то есть там мясо в маринаде, вот, есть plantains, то есть это бананы, но это не бананы, сейчас узнаем почему, да, там бобы и рис. Ага, окей.
Okay, so I don't know that much about plantains, but they're bigger than bananas, and people cook them a lot. They're sweeter, I think, and they slice them up and they fry them with sugar and cinnamon, and they make them into a savory dish.
Да, то есть это бананы, но они более сладкие, то есть их используют в различных блюдах, готовят их также с корицей и сахаром, и, так сказать, такой десерт получается очень насыщенный. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, if you go to Texas, you get Mexican food. So in, the regional variation there would be lots of Mexican food. And there is, of course, a large Hispanic population in Texas. And so you can get some very good genuine Mexican, and then a variety that they call Tex-Mex, which is sort of like Americanized Mexican food.
Right. Да, то есть, если вы находитесь в Техасе, то там будет большой выбор мексиканской кухни, также есть там мексиканско-американская кухня, то есть американизированная мексиканская еда.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Okay. Now, one thing that you probably know about the South is our involvement in the Civil War. And of course, the South lost the Civil War. But one thing that you will find if you visit the South or if you live in the South is that the Civil War is still a very popular topic here.
Так, то есть все знают.
There are people who...
No.
Go ahead.
You can finish your thought.
Okay. So there are people who are Civil War reenactors, and there are a lot of people who have very strong feelings about the Civil War, who, maybe want to fly the Civil War flag, or who are interested in the history of the Civil War and the participation of their family members in the Civil War, and so on.
То есть также все знают про гражданскую войну, которая произошла, да, вот между югом и севером. Вот, и многие люди очень интересуются до сих пор этой темой. Тема очень такая уникальная. То есть кто-то хочет выступать вот в таких вот, так сказать, как сказать, реставрация, не реставрация. Как правильно это будет по-русски? Как когда переигрывают вот войну, допустим, да, переодеваются и так далее. One sec, I need an outside consultant for this one. Okay, nobody knows. It's fine. Да, то есть вот то, что вы видите... Да, Ну, реконструкция битв, например, да. Также там идет просто люди, которые интересуются именно историей. Вот, гражданской войны. Okay, can you hear me?
Fight to keep those up.
Yeah, the connection broke up a bit. Okay, good. I'm done.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is our language here. So one of the things that you will hear people talk about, and you might notice if you're a good English speaker, is in the South, we have what they call a Southern drawl. So I actually don't sound like a Southerner. I grew up in Louisiana near New Orleans, and I sort of developed a more neutral accent because I sort of trained myself away from an accent. But some people have very thick Southern drawls. And one of those people I'm going to introduce to you right now, this is my fiance, and he's from Georgia, and he has a very thick Southern drawl.
Hey y'all, how are you?
Oh, wow.
I
Hey
don't
there.
think it's that thick, but nice to meet you.
Wow,
So,
wonderful. Thank you for that.
so so I tease him all the time because he has a very thick Southern drawl. So he'll say things like, "Hey, don't do that," and he's got just a really thick Southern drawl. But people in parts of Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina speak with these very thick Southern drawls. Now, of course, that's not everywhere. In New Orleans, you'll hear a different accent. Obviously, in Florida, because of the Cuban influence there, a lot of people speak Spanish. In Texas, you'll have different accents. But in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, a lot of people will talk like my fiance. And one of the things that you'll notice is the use of the word y'all. So surely you have heard of this word before. It's a contraction. It means you all, really, but we use it for everything. So you can use it to mean one person. You can use it to mean several people. You can even put a possessive S on it. So you could ask, "How are y'all's parents doing?"
Yeah, that's the next
So
level.
yeah, so it's a word that has really come to kind of represent Southern language, and you do hear it now in other parts of the country because, of course, people have adopted it. But it truly is a Southern word.
Okay, let me translate real
Okay.
quick. Yep, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
so Southern Drawl, то есть то, что сейчас мы обсудили в двух словах, то есть это южный акцент, да, когда все слова растягиваются, и комбинация слов y'all или you all, это вы все, да, то есть это как бы может относиться к одному человеку, может относиться к группе, вот, и может просто использоваться в любой, так сказать, подходящей ситуации. Okay,
Okay.
just shorten that up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Okay, and then
No, it's
finally
fine.
the weather. It's warm here pretty much all year round. Obviously, the further north you go, the more cold weather you get, and so maybe from the north of Alabama up, you'll get some snow in the winter sometimes. So it was snowing in Tennessee recently, a couple of days ago, but it's not uncommon for it to be warm enough on Christmas Day to wear short sleeves and a pair of shorts. Of course, it's important to realize that global climate change is messing up our weather. So now we're having lots of weird variations, just like you are in Russia.
Yeah, okay. То есть насчет погоды, погода отличная, но также зимой, конечно же, идет снег. В Луизиане, например, недавно выпал снег. Вот. Но сейчас наблюдаются такие же вариации в погоде, и, естественно, такие же, как и в России. So
Okay.
global warming is having an effect on the south, eh?
Yes, it's getting hotter in the summer and it's getting, colder in the winter sometime too. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I need to address, of course, is the topic of racism. So this is a map from 2015 from the Washington Post that did a sort of a Google research based on Google searches to determine where racism was the most intense in the United States. And so you can see that there are definitely more places in the South that are in red than in, for example, the Midwest or the West. But you can also see that there's a lot of racism in the North.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I want to acknowledge is that we do have a problem with racism in the South. It's more open in the South, so people are more likely to say something out loud in the South that is offensive. But there is racism in the Northeast as well.
Yeah, and since I live there, I can, testify to that. Just a lot of people acting there like they're living in Georgia, like deep rural Georgia. No idea why, but it's an interesting phenomenon, honestly. Like, it's not something you can explain to people. Like,
Right. Yeah, it's very hard. And if you don't share that mindset,
yeah.
it's shocking how many times people will say something to you assuming that you will agree with them. I mean, it's just awful.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely not the South. I mean, if you live in the North for a little bit, you'll notice it's kind of, yeah, it's very pronounced for some reason. Okay, let me translate. So, да, то есть насчет расизма, да, то есть стереотип о том, что на юге очень много расизма, да, в нем есть доля правды, но на севере также это наблюдается, то есть я сам жил на севере, и там серьезные, так сказать, вопросы возникают, потому что но на юге больше шансов, что люди скажут что-то вслух, то, что может, так сказать, кого-то обидеть, ну, это мягко говоря, да? Okay.
And so just in conclusion, I just want to say that, the South it certainly has its problems, but the South is a wonderful place, beautiful weather, much history, lots of really interesting places to visit, both, the environment itself, the climate, we have lovely beaches, but we also have amazing museums, wonderful universities, and some really interesting cities, lots of amazing food. So I hope that if any of you get the chance to visit the United States, you'll decide that you should visit the South as well.
Absolutely. Okay, то есть в целом, да, завершению нашего вебинара, да, то есть на юге отличная еда, отличные пляжи, отличная погода и очень вежливые, вот, интересные люди, и очень много историй, да, то есть если вы соберетесь поехать в США, то обязательно приезжайте на юг, вот, и там, да, проведите время, окунитесь, так сказать, в эту сферу. Okay, we got time for some questions. Let's see what we got. Questions. Let me ask you first. So about history, I mean, can you tell us maybe a little bit about, since you're a history professor, right? What are some main topics that you're kind of more involved in? Like Civil War, or what's your Russian history? I'm sorry, geez, I'm just
So my area of specialty is Russian-American relations. Especially at the end of the 19th century and into the early 20th century. So in 2014, I published a book called Alexis in America about the visit of Russian Grand Duke Alexis to the United States in 1871 and 72. Alexis was the son of Alexander II. And he visited the United States for 3 months. And while he was here, he went buffalo hunting. He visited all the major cities of the United States. He visited Chicago right after the Great Fire. Right. And he was in New Orleans for the first daytime Mardi Gras celebration.
Wow.
So he had a very interesting trip. And so I wrote a book about that. Then I wrote a book about the Alaska Purchase, which you heard me speak about when I was in Arkhangelsk. And then most recently, I just finished a book on a scandal that occurred in 1871-72 concerning the Russian ambassador to the United States, who was involved in all sorts of shenanigans and got on the bad side of the American government. And so they asked the Russian government to recall him and bring him back home.
Right. Wow. That's interesting. Okay, so I got a question from Rochelle.
Okay, great.
What sparked your initial interest in Russian history, culture, and language?
So I grew up in a small town in Louisiana. I have no connection to Russia at all. But when I was in high school, I had a friend who was a little bit older than I was, and she went off to college and she started studying the Russian language because she wanted to be a journalist in Russia. And that's what got me interested. And I started reading books on my own about Russia and decided that I wanted to study Russian history.
Wow. Okay, great. Let's see. She says in California, everyone says guys instead of y'all. Yeah, it's kind of true. Okay. High concentration of sugar. Okay. Let's see. What else did I want to ask? How was your family affected by Hurricane Katrina?
So my parents, they were affected, but we were lucky. They did not lose any property, but they did have to evacuate, and they had to stay away from their home for a couple of weeks. And when they came back home, they didn't have electricity for several more weeks. And then for months afterwards, it was very difficult to purchase groceries and things like that. They had to drive to other towns to get groceries.
Okay, well. All right. What about the corona situation in the South? How is that? Is there any difference between, other parts of the country and the South at the moment?
I don't think it's worse here than other places, but I will say that, in Montgomery is Alabama is a very conservative state. So, more people voted for Trump in Alabama than for Biden.
Yeah.
So it's a very conservative state. And so it also means then that you have a lot of people who don't believe that the pandemic is genuine. Mm-hmm. And so, we do see a lot of people going about their business without wearing masks. So we have been very good. We stay home most of the time. When we go to the grocery store or other places, we always have our masks on. But we see people without masks. And so it's, and I think that's partly a factor of, this being a Trump state and people not believing it.
Yeah, well, if you don't believe it, doesn't exist. Right, no politics. Okay, actually, another interesting question. Like in upstate New York, there are a lot of Russian, well, not quite Russian, but like Ukrainian, Jewish, Russian-speaking communities. Are there, I know there are Eastern Orthodox monasteries. There's one in Georgia. I know that for a fact. Are there any other Russian-speaking communities in the South, big ones that you know of, or any for that matter?
In the big cities, you'll find some Russian-speaking communities. And so, for example, in Atlanta, you can go and find Russian speakers and you can find Russian products. Also in Dallas, when I was in Dallas a couple of years ago, I visited a Russian grocery store where I was able to buy some of my favorite Russian products and things, But where I live in Montgomery, there really aren't any Russian speakers. Once in a while, I might find somebody because we have an Air Force base. Mm-hmm. So sometimes somebody affiliated with the Air Force will be Russian, but mostly I don't encounter Russians anywhere around here.
Interesting, yeah. But maybe it's a church thing, if there are Eastern Orthodox churches, that's where, you can usually find Russian-speaking people.
Yeah, and we don't have that here, so...
Yeah. Okay, what is everyone Catholic in the South, or is it more of a Baptist? What's the split?
It depends on where you are. Mm-hmm. So in Louisiana, because of the French influence, everybody there, it's French and Spanish influence, everybody there is Catholic. Mm-hmm. Florida is very Catholic, but in Alabama, a lot of people are Baptists. Right, so it really depends on where you go. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Interesting, man. I have so many questions, but I don't know how much time we have left. Yeah, I think that will just about do it. So, actually, one more thing about, you said Alexander II was in the South at some point. Is that correct?
His son was.
Just went here to party. Okay. Are there any other, historical connections, since we're doing a cross-cultural communications?
Right.
Are there any other historical links between Russia and the South? Maybe 200 years ago, 100 years ago, anything.
There aren't a lot. Alexander II was the only. I'm sorry. Alexis was the only one who came to the South during that period of time that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm not so much the South. There were other Russians who visited, the United States, of course, but not a lot in the South. They usually went to the North, to visit the big cities up north. So, one of the things that I'm looking into, possibly writing something about, is the visit of Maxim Gorky to the United States in the early 20th century. But I haven't started working on that yet. So
interesting. Yeah, that's something to look into. Okay. Well, anyway, so do you have any questions for me or for us?
I don't think so. I get, I hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy during the pandemic. I know everybody is as ready for it to be over as I am. I am so eager to travel again. I like to travel. That's one of my hobbies. I look for every opportunity to travel. And it's been really hard not being able to go anywhere for be over as I am. I'm hoping that changes soon.
Yeah, right. There is a question. Good evening, morning. I'm a historian from Russia, and I study reasons of civil war, especially reasons of Southern secession. So I have a couple of questions for you. What do common people think about why the war started, and who is blamed? And the second, can you tell? Okay, let's start with the first question. Do you still have some time for us?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is, why did the war start? What do regular common people in the South think was the reason for the Civil War?
Okay, it's hard for me to generalize and know that I'm correct on this, but I would be willing to bet that if you went just walking around the streets and asking people why the Civil War started, most people, common people, would say that it had to do with states' rights.
States' rights.
People who are more educated would know that it's about slavery.
Okay, and the second question was, a modern American. Can you tell, as a historian, the modern American historians? Okay, so what he's trying to ask is, what are some modern American historians that are researching, the topic of Civil War in the South?
I would have to kind of look that up. I'm not a Civil War historian, so I'm not as conversant with the names of historians as he would need. So, if you want to share his email address, if he wants to share his email address, and you could send that to me. I do have a colleague who works on the Civil War, so I could ask him for advice on that question.
Okay. I'll put that in the comments section, so we'll get in touch, right?
Yeah.
And
because I'd be happy to put them in touch together.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we got all the questions. Anyway, so thank you very much for joining us. We're definitely gonna see you in Arhanghelsk. It's gonna happen.
Okay, good.
Because everyone that participates, you and Rochelle, everyone else, are gonna have short mini lectures, mini conferences, and it'll be great. And I'm planning for the summer.
Okay.
All of this will blow over, and if not, we have time. So
yeah.
Okay, so I apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know, just everything went berserk today, but it doesn't matter because Facebook held out, and whatever. I'll post things on VK, and I'll repost this webinar. It's fine. We'll work on it. We don't have a whole department. It's mostly just me. So, but everything went perfectly fine, like VK and Facebook and YouTube. I don't know, but I'll practice my streaming skills for next time. Okay, so thank you, Professor Lee. I like Professor Lee better than Dr. Lee. Anyway, super nice. Thank you for answering all the questions. A lot of interesting info. And basically we'll announce, when everything's over, when you'll be able to come over, and we'll have a great time.
Good. Well, I think, I really do think maybe by summertime it'll be okay to travel.
It will be, I'm sure of it. It's just like, things are getting worse, and then suddenly, we're back to normal. So, yeah.
One of the things I'm thinking is that probably from this point forward, maybe we're going to see more people like wearing masks and things when they fly. Do you think so as well?
Possibly. Well, I recently flew to St. Petersburg and another city, and it's mostly, he sent email. Very interesting conversation. I'm so glad. Thank you, Andre. Man. Okay. So, I'm sending your email to Professor Lee right now. And she'll be in touch with you. Man, I'm really great. This is what it's all about. Even if we get like one person, but we got more than that. It's fine. Right. So back to your question. Let me get rid of this. Back to the question. Where is Zoom? Nobody was wearing masks. Social distancing in an airport and on an airplane is kind of not really a thing. So they have to either just ground all the flights and destroy the economy completely and start fresh, or we can keep doing the little dance.
Wow.
But that's my opinion. Might be a little edgy, but I mean, it's we're all sitting next to each other on a plane for several hours. You can only get sick if you sit on a plane for several hours, like in close proximity to other people. So that's so basically all of these flights are incubators for corona.
Yeah. We've just been furious at the lack of cooperation in so many places because, I understand. I mean, obviously I'm not an epidemiologist, but I understand enough about diseases. I'm an educated person that, if we had actually done what we were supposed to do months ago, things would probably be much better than they are now. But so many people have just ignored the guidelines that it's just continued to make things worse.
Yeah, I agree. But at least we'll be ready for the next global pandemic. Now we know what's going on, and there probably is going to be one because now we're so connected that it's just a natural turn of course of events that we had the swine flu, and the black plague is okay. That's a bit much, but. I mean, it's just now we'll know what's going on. So if we see signs of this sort of thing happening again, everything will be a little better. But I mean, the damage is kind of already done to the economy and everything. So, but things are changing because now we're more connected than ever. No one has to go to the office anymore. I mean, that's kind of done and over with. So after Corona, things are just the world is never going to be the same. It never really.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
But really hope to meet in person, and it will be much better. Even though this is great, honestly, and it was a lot of fun. All the technical stuff doesn't matter as long as we got together. Yeah, we helped out. Had some good questions, and I'm really happy that we're together in this. Alrighty, so thank you very much. Let's see, any more questions? I think we're good. Yes, just some people saying thank you. Nice, awesome,
good, fantastic. Good.
Yeah. All right. So have a fantastic day. I'm assuming it's okay, and it's 10 p.m. here. Okay. Yeah. And we'll keep in touch. All right.
Okay. Great. So bye, Mark. Stay healthy.
Bye, everyone. You too. Bye, bye.